Welcome to Ravenwoods. On today's episode, we have 10 true ghost stories that were found on the internet. Number 1. I lived in a haunted house when I was a teen, along with my parents. Several instances come to mind. We were remodeling an old farmhouse, and there had been a couple of months before we witnessed anything. One day, I was underneath my truck, which was supported by only a jack. Yeah, stupid, I know. I was in the middle of working at it, with no good reason to get out at that moment. Suddenly, the urge to get out from underneath the truck overwhelmed me. No sooner than I got out, the truck fell to the ground. The jack had slipped. It freaked my dad out. He thought I was under it. When Mom got home, we mentioned it, and she started crying, sobbing pretty hard. It turns out the previous owner died in the driveway under a vehicle in that spot. I would often see moving shadows and strangely hear music from the upstairs area. The windows of the old house were caulked shut, and blackbirds would often get caught between the panes. We ended up replacing all of the windows, but we had to break 3 inside panes to get birds out. One of the more disturbing things happened when my mother was cooking breakfast. She turned away to get something out of the cabinet, and when she turned back around, all of the forks were set out and bent straight up. Number 2. My father-in-law died before my son was born, so he never met him. We moved into our new home. My son would often be laughing in the middle of the night by himself. No biggie, kids will play anything. One day, we were finally putting pictures up in the house, and once I put the picture of my father-in-law up, he said, "Mommy, why do you have a picture of the man that comes in and plays with me at night?" He had never seen a picture of my father-in-law before. Number 3. So 2 weeks before we moved, my dad and I toured our house and noticed this guy was painting the water heater, which I thought was weird AF. But I was like 10, so whatever. Anyway, we moved in on a Wednesday. My parents let me stay home from school until the following Monday and preoccupied me with coloring books and a new dollhouse. In my brand new crayons pack, there literally wasn't a blue crayon. It was like a 64 pack, but there were only 63 crayons in it. One day I went downstairs into the basement and my blue crayon was next to the hot water heater, and scribbled on it, it said, "Hi Fitner 6-Kevin." I was so confused. I started school with my new classmates, and they were like, "Oh my God, do you live in Kevin's house? Your house is going to be haunted." It turned out that Kevin was an 8-year-old boy that lived in our house prior to us, and he got hit by a car in the front yard. He would write notes if you left out pen and paper, open and close doors, adjust the thermostat, and always turned on Christmas music when it was that time of year. We had a swing set in the backyard, and even on the hottest, calmest days of summer, only the left swing would be moving back and forth. We had this dumb cat that I would lock in my bedroom at night, and every morning my parents would open the door and let him out, then close it back. One night I woke up and the cat was meowing at the door, and it woke me up, but the door opened and the cat hissed and ran out really fast. I asked my mom the next morning why they didn't close my door, and they said that they didn't open it. The last story is that I was really upset and nearly suicidal one year during Christmas break. The police just randomly showed up at my house. The policeman said he was patrolling our neighborhood and felt like something was wrong at our house. I'm absolutely certain Kevin had something to do with it. Number 4. I'm not the type to believe in ghosts, but this happened to me and I have no explanation. My mom passed away in 2016 at the age of 56 of cancer. She was in hospice and died in her home. One of her favorite songs was "Somewhere Over the Rainbow," which I added to her memorial video. Fast forward a few months later, I'm cleaning out her home and her belongings by myself. There is no one else there. At one point, I have an emotional breakdown and step outside to collect myself. When I return, I hear music coming from the other side of the house, which immediately struck me as weird as I was the only one there, and the electricity into the home was shut off. I followed the music to a bookshelf where I found it emanating from a snow globe. It's emotion activated and only plays music when picked up, the song "Somewhere Over the Rainbow." I had the best haunter ever, and I missed my first home because of this. I grew up with a cat, Boots, and he was just 1 year younger than me. Boots was motivated only by food and spent his later years sleeping on my parents' bed until someone came home. Then he'd jump off the bed with a thunk thunk of his front paws and back paws hitting the ground, and run to his food bowl to beg. He had to be put down when I was 18. My parents moved out of my childhood home during my first year of college. I went back a few times before it was sold. Every time, I was certain I felt a cat's presence, like I'd hesitate to step because I was just sure that a cat just walked under my legs. Also, upon walking in, I'd always hear a thunk thunk, like Boots was jumping down to beg for food. My mom and I went back for the last day my family would ever be in that home, and I told her what I had experienced. To my surprise, she had the exact same feeling. When we walked back into the house, thunk thunk, we exchanged shocked glances and confirmed that we had both heard it. I went and sat in my empty room while my mom got her final things together, and while my eyes were closed, I had to force myself not to pet a cat that I felt walked up to me because I knew logically he wasn't there. Before leaving, we stood in the hallway outside my parents' room and hugged each other and cried, saying bye to my first home. I said I thought Boots was still around and suggested we take his spirit to the new house. She agreed, so she called out, "Bootsy!" from my parents' room. Thunk, thunk. We both heard it. I don't think he came with us. He never liked car rides, but I hope the owners since us have enjoyed their ghost kitty. He was a good boy. Number 6. Years ago, my husband and I were trying to see if we could get a modest house by contract for deed. We took my sister along to look at the house. It still had some personal items in it, as though the people had just stepped out, but it was for sale. We all walked through, and we were hopeful. Suddenly, my sister said, "Wait, I know whose house this was. The house belonged to that guy my son knew who died in his kitchen. It was Tony's house." At that precise moment, a cabinet door shot open and whacked her on the backside. Never one to be rattled easily, she looked up and said, "Okay, Tony, I get it." We checked, and it was indeed his house. The cabinet had been tightly shut, and the floor was stable. I'd never seen a cabinet door randomly swing open with the force behind it like that. Not enough to hurt, but fast, as though it had a hand that whipped it open. You had to be there. I wish we would have gotten the house, even though it was haunted. He was known to be a nice guy, very funny, and we wouldn't have minded sharing it with him. Number 7. My mom and dad passed just 5 weeks apart, of unrelated cancers, when we had taken our son with us to my parents' house to feed the cats. My son was 7 at the time, and he wandered downstairs to explore. At some point, he reappeared upstairs, strangely subdued. At the time, he hadn't learned to lie, nor did he make stuff up. My wife noticed his demeanor and asked, "What's up, kid?" He said, "Pop Pop is outside by the fence. I want to go home now." Number 8. When I was in college, I lived in an apartment complex. Every once in a while, around 2 a.m., I would hear breaking glass. It was clear as day. I never found any broken glass anywhere around my apartment. My younger brother would come out and party with us, and once or twice he came busting into my room, thinking somebody was breaking in. Finally, one night, my girlfriend stayed over. She would kick and push in her sleep, and at some point she nudged me, and I woke up. I looked over at her, and she wasn't sleeping. She was sitting at the foot of my bed, facing away from me. When I said her name, she stood up and walked out of the room, and then the sound of glass breaking happened. I looked around and realized that she was still laying next to me in bed. That was the only time I ever saw anything in that place, but I heard sounds pretty consistently. Number 9. I was babysitting my niece when she was 2 years old. My sister was renting a very old house that was built in the 1930s. I'm alone in this place with her while my sister is working overnight. It's about 11 p.m., and she's been asleep for a couple of hours at this point. I'm watching TV in the living room, and I see her running down the dark hallway. She stops just before the entryway to the living room, and I jokingly said, better get back to bed, or I'm going to get you." I got up to get her back to bed, turned the hallway light on, and found that her bedroom door was still closed. I opened it to find my niece completely passed out in her bed, drooling and everything. It wasn't my niece I saw in the hallway, so I took her to sleep with me that night. Number 10. At the time when this happened, about 8 years ago, when I didn't believe in ghosts as much, my family and I were staying at a historical hotel in Winnipeg. I had a few spare moments and decided to explore the hotel because it was absolutely beautiful. I got lost, and I happened to run into someone who looked like they worked for the hotel, but weren't a house cleaner or clerk, so I was unsure of their position or job. I asked for directions back to the lobby, since I had to meet my family in a few minutes. The moment I arrived in the lobby and walked past the front desk, a clerk and security guard were staring at me in shocked and pale faces. The security guard asked me who I'd been talking with earlier and who had given me directions back to the lobby. I told him that I thought someone who worked for the hotel. Well, wouldn't you know, it turns out the floor I was on, I can't remember it for the life of me, has a bunch of paranormal shit that goes on regularly. The person I was talking to never appeared on the security feed, even though they should have been in plain view. It was super creepy, because I had shaken this person's hand for some reason, and the footage would just show me shaking hands with the air. The person appeared in front of me, as any other person would have. When I touched their hand, it felt like any squishy person would normally feel, yet they did not show up on the footage. There is no way I could have blocked out the person from view of the camera either, as I'm only 5'6". The security guard even pulled a second angle for further proof. No one else believes me despite the footage. To this day, I still don't know how to explain it. And that wraps up this episode. If you'd like to see more content like this, please subscribe to my channel. Thanks for watching, and have a great day.